So,
How do we have beer?
what's up, Robbie?
Do we get beer for this? Do we get beer?
Yeah.
You said he had it set up. They had it ready.
Alright,
Like, I was going to
alright.
grab it. And you're like, no. Alex has got it taken care of. And then we're started.
All right, so we're just gonna turn us on and chit chat. I think we might be on already.
Are we
aren't
on?
Oh, look at that.
Well, welcome everybody. We decided to start this tasting off without beer since we there's still no refrigerator. So we're sending people out to go grab our beers.
But yeah, thank you guys for showing up. I know you guys all bought the boxes. We're really excited about getting back to our homebrew roots at Barebottle here. If you guys don't know the story, Lester tells it really well, but we are a very homebrew based brewery. And after 5 years of growing pains and growth and expansion and fun and COVID, we felt like it was a great idea to get back to that idea and throw a homebrew competition and brew some homebrew recipes. So we're gonna go through all those. I mean, I'm even here at Barebottle. My name is Magic, by the way, co-head brewer here. I'm even here because of a homebrew competition. So homebrew is near and dear to my heart.
Yes, and the beers have arrived slightly off camera, but
And
so, yeah. So as Magic was saying, like, just this is a really fun to go, or what do we call this box? The anniversary box, I guess. A really fun kind of anniversary box for us because, as Magic was alluding to, we're getting back to our roots, and we've never done a box like this before. You know, like we had some during COVID, some different kind of a couple themed boxes, but this one is really near and dear to our hearts because these are all 4 beers. Cheers! All 4 beers are homebrew collaboration beers. 3 of which that we're going to be tasting through today have been brewed for the first time, and they were part of a recent homebrew competition. And then the Muir Woods, as I'm sure people here have known and have heard about before. Like that's one of our OG staples. That was actually the winner from the first ever homebrew competition that we did, which was the Muir Woods competition.
And if you guys already don't have a beer, you guys should be drinking with us. You get 2 of each beer in the box. We are starting off with Campione. We literally just looked up how to actually pronounce that.
Yeah, I didn't think there was an E actually pronounced at the end, but the Italians do pronounce the E.
Yeah, and Campione is Italian for champion, and this was one of the homebrew champions in the homebrew competition we threw. And amazing beer. Brewer Damian Jones out of Santa Rosa, Petaluma,
Sonoma.
Sonoma.
You're like 50% right on all these things so far.
But at the beginning of COVID, when the National Homebrew Competition, which goes on every year, was canceled, the Northern California chapter region who was throwing the competition, Doze, or managing the competition, it's a homebrew club called Doze. You should look it up. Awesome homebrew club, and the president is on the Zoom or Google Chat or whatever we're on right now. That's Robbie Proctor. There, he was the inspiration behind 3 of these beers, not all 4, but 3 of them. So and so they managed to still judge the beers that were submitted for the Northern California region of the competition, and where every other club who was managing every other region in the country had thrown in the towel, said we're in COVID, understandable. There's too much going on. We're not going to be able to do it. Robbie and the Doze crew said, nah, screw it. And, in great homebrew fashion, they pulled it off. So in honor of that, Lester decided to throw a competition. We reined it in a little bit, but any of the winners of all the categories in the competition were able to submit to us, and we asked them to make either a West Coast IPA or an Italian Pilsner. What is an Italian Pilsner for those of you who don't know? And if you don't have it open, please open up the can, drink along with us. Italian Pilsner is at its most basic, a German Pilsner, but dry hopped with German hops. So that's really what it is.
Wait, say that again. So the Italian Pilsner is a German Pilsner with German hops.
Dry hopped with German hops.
Yep. All right.
At its basic, I think we in America have taken that a step further. But the original beer, the original Italian style Pilsner is Tipo Pils, out of Italy, and that uses that dry hopping, which which is near and dear to our heart here, to amp up the aroma, the character, the overall character of the beer. And so you get those same beautiful, subtle, crisp, delicious, refreshing notes you know and love from a German Pilsner, but kind of amped up. Not over the top. It isn't like a hoppy Pilsner necessarily. You would never even know that this was potentially dry hopped, but that's kind of the beauty in it. It's taking subtlety to an extreme.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful lager, and this is why we love to do homebrew competitions here. Is we already made at the time an Italian Pilsner that we all really liked from one of our brewers. Did a really good job, and then we brewed this one, and we're like, man, that's probably like one of the top 3 lagers we've ever done before. We hope everybody who's drinking it agrees. It's just got, like I always tell people, the irony is if you want subtlety in beer right now in craft beer, like this is where you find it. You find it in the lagers, you find it in the Pilsners, because you taste, the noble hops, whether it's an earthy, a floral, or a spiciness. You taste this really sweet, beautiful grain character from the Pilsner malt or whatever malt is used in there. It provides that nice kind of bready, biscuity note to it. And then it's dry and it's refreshing. And so, like, to me, there's so much subtlety and beauty and kind of the nuance of lagers that, the irony is like, this is where you find nuance now, is in lagers and not in some of the other styles.
So I love that Alex here has got a screen facing us with a bunch of questions that you guys are asking. And so we're going to try to answer them.
Yeah, I will. If it's something that you guys need to answer about a specific beer right now, let you guys know now, and then answer them based on the beer. So get to other questions.
Okay. So I don't know if that means I should or shouldn't answer this question, but so we do list. Raymond's says that we list our recipes on the label, which we do to show that there are no secrets. We're not doing anything that any other brewery could or couldn't do. And again, as homebrewers, you love reaching out to breweries and seeing what they're doing. If you taste a beer, you want to know how they do it, learn from that. But as a former homebrewer, I will say that the difference in what makes each beer unique at every single brewery is the brewery itself. There's a difference in equipment and process and temperature and how the brewer was feeling that day. And all those little things can really affect how a beer turns out. And so the recipe is just part of that equation. And when we give you the recipe, you can absolutely make a beer from that. That is the skeleton of how to make the beer.
All scaled to 5 gallons. So like the typical home brewer size.
I will say that this gives you everything you need to make the recipe, but because there's so many variations in equipment and process, we don't go through every single detail in that regard. You kind of do need to maybe put it into a recipe calculator to kind of for your equipment, but you can absolutely use this as a really good baseline to make the recipes. There's amazing homebrew websites from Homebrew Talk or morebeer.com that can help you with the nitty gritty details of how to actually brew. At the same time, you can always just email us and we're happy to help any way we can.
Yeah, More Beer is a great homebrew shop. They're not sponsoring this podcast. This isn't even a podcast, so we're not getting any money from More Beer. But they're great folks. Any homebrew shop is such a great resource for dumb questions, smart questions, recipe questions, every homebrew shop is really united and they care about homebrewing, and they want to help make better beer. They want people to make better beer. They want to be your guide. And they're also like really good places to bring samples to. I would always bring samples to homebrew shops and be like, hey, like I think I need to change this. What do you think? And then we would drink it and try it. And they were nice enough not to just like spit it out. So it's great.
Homebrew clubs are also a really good resource.
Yep.
I think I learned more at my homebrew club in Los Angeles or that's where I learned the fastest, is like leaps and bounds going and trying everyone's beers and asking how they did it and having people try my beer. Doe's is a great club if you're a local, but there's clubs everywhere. So if you really want to get into brewing, absolutely check out your local homebrew club.
Every like major little metro area in the Bay Area kind of has their own homebrew club. So San Francisco has a San Francisco Homebrewers Guild. The East Bay, so kind of the Oakland, Berkeley area, has the Bay Area Mashers. Doe's is Walnut Creek and everywhere else kind of on that side of the hills in the East Bay. I believe, I don't know if it was Robbie or someone told me, I think it was Robbie, that they won National Homebrew Club of the Year as well. So congratulations, guys. Well done. And the beer that Magic's opening right now, which is the Hands to Hold, the white IPA, this also just won in its category, which was experimental IPA in the National Homebrew Competition. This just won after we'd already brewed it. I think right when we were canning it, it won a gold. So it won its category nationally. So this is a great one that we're starting to like dive into next. I'll tell a little bit of story about the home brewer here. So Andrew Simsack has been probably one of the best home brewers in San Francisco for a long time. Every homebrew competition I think that we've done, he's been a finalist in, and he was a finalist again in this competition. And if you heard what Magic had said earlier, like we asked everyone to brew a West Coast IPA and a lager. This is neither, or Italian Pilsner. This is neither, because he didn't win the competition, but he was a finalist, like as usual for one of our homebrew comps. He's such a good guy, comes to the brewery all the time, just an amazing kind of warm-hearted person, but also makes tremendous beer. And it's been in the back of our minds to do something with him, so it just made sense for us to do something with Andrew at this time as well. And this is a super awesome, just Belgian white IPA. And I'll pause there for a second and I can let Magic explain what that is.
White IPA. This was I used to brew these a lot at home. I also used to brew wit beer a lot at home. A white IPA came about, I think, in the early 2010s when everyone was taking IPA and it was exploding and trying to make their own variation. It was black IPA, red IPA, rye IPA, and then white IPA was taking a traditionally Belgian style wit beer, so heavy wheat with spice with coriander and orange peel, but turning it into an IPA, so dry hopping it, which actually I think works extremely well. Those Belgian esters really help amp up the fruitiness of the hops, and in some ways is like kind of a precursor to hazy IPA. There's a lot of very similar flavor profiles. A white IPA. In this case, we decided to, after chatting with Andrew, he came by, we tried his beer. It's always fun to scale these recipes up.
Yeah, and he brought this beer in, like this particular brew that he brought in, which became Hands to Hold. Was just something, I love the story. Like he was brewing this beer at home. He just started brewing it really during the pandemic. And this became kind of the beer that he used to honor the folks that he knew, I think his wife included, who volunteer at San Francisco Suicide Prevention. And so for him, this beer was a kind of a tribute to kind of the mental health crisis that this pandemic has caused. And so it meant a lot emotionally for him to brew this beer at home. And he's like, hey, I had this great style beer. Like, you guys want to try it? And so that's what he brought in, and it was just awesome. It just had this beautiful balance between these kind of a traditional kind of Belgian wit beer, think Allagash White, think original Hoegaarden, like this nice, really pretty, clovey, phenolic and esters that make a Belgian beer Belgian, but it also had the hoppiness, and the snappiness, and the hop profile, and the citrus, and the coriander that really kind of bridge these gaps. And for me, like I always like laughed at the idea of like Belgian IPAs. I'm like, every one that I've ever had, has been terrible. No offense to the homebrewers if you brewed one, but everything I tried, it was terrible until I tried this one, and it really kind of blew me away with just the nuance, the subtlety, the character, and the drinkability of it. And I loved it as a homebrew version, and super pumped that we did this on the pro side.
Absolutely. And working with Andrew, who now is actually a professional brewer as well, since the pandemic started.
Yep.
We did work with him to kind of answer the question that Raymond's asking: do the homebrew winners and finalists oversee the brewing process in the brewery? In the sense that we work with them innately to figure out exactly what we're going to do, and we do it the way they want to do it, as long as it works on our system. Yes, we absolutely let them decide on the process, because that is part of the recipe. So Andrew came in, we tasted through the beer, he took copious notes on his brew, and
Andrew has a lot of notes.
A lot of notes. I translated those into in order to try to achieve the same beer on our system, because it's not a one-to-one science 100% of the time. One of the things that we did change, and we decided to change, was actually going full into wit beer territory and using the original Hoegaarden yeast strain, which is not necessarily available to homebrewers. So I think that is kind of a really fun thing that we get to do as a larger brewery. There's only one brewery in the country, or one yeast lab, that offers that yeast. So it was kind of a fun thing for both of us to try something completely new. And I think, honestly, that yeast is one of the best yeast we've ever used here at the brewery.
It helps to make this beer.
I think you use Belgian, as a homebrewer, you use a Belgian yeast, and sometimes people say that it's like you got to ferment them warm to get certain flavors, or cold, and it's always out of balance. And this yeast somehow is perfectly balanced across the spectrum of flavor, and with the hop sitting on top, it never gets in the way. And actually rounds the entire beer out. So you get this full-bodied character from this heavy wheat profile, but you get just these Belgian esters and phenolics. So you get a little bit of orange, a little bit of bubblegum, a little bit of clove, and then that hop character sits in everywhere.
It's also interesting because it tastes to me a little bit sweet. Like it's kind of hard to describe, because it tastes a little bit sweet, or what we associate as sweet, but it's completely dry. And so it kind of has this like slightly like candied, like a cotton candy-ish, like Belgian sugar. And maybe that's just like me projecting, like I think that because it's a Belgian beer. But to me, like, it's like you said, it's so completely unique. It's so completely different than every Belgian strain that I ever used as a home brewer. And it just really, like these two beers, that we're drinking right now are probably two of my favorite beers we've done in the last 9 or 12 months.
And to get back to why this whole brewery started, I think sometimes homebrewers, everyone has their own unique perspective about how to do things. And it's easy to forget that sometimes, especially now at scale. And getting back to those roots is kind of fun, and tasting differences in
Yep. I mean, and that's why it's always good, for us to go out and try out the brewery's beers. Because it gives us like a different viewpoints on flavors and what's possible. And that's like one thing that I think a lot of professional breweries don't really think about, and they kind of ignore, is the homebrew side. And for us, it's always so inspirational to taste what people are making at home. And I always tell people too, like, probably some of the best beer being made in America are being made by homebrewers. They have such a low risk for failure. They're always innovating, iterating, and there's just so much passion around it. It's not about them trying to make money, because legally you can't make money off of it. You're really doing it strictly for the passion of brewing. And when when we judge homebrew competitions, certainly not just ours, but the bigger competitions, when you drink the category finalists, when you drink the best of shows, you're like, this is better than 80-90% of what commercial breweries can make. And I feel like it's such like this untapped treasure trove of inspiration of how good something can be. And like, we are lucky as a professional brewery, to have these linkages to the homebrew side, and to be able to get some really kind of great innovative beers and ideas from homebrewers. Because like I just said, these are two of my favorite beers we brewed in the last year, and these are two homebrew beers.
Question here. Do we test the same hop recipe with different what's best? That is a great question. We are always testing out hops, always testing out yeast. We just recently have started using a different yeast than we've used in the last 3 years in-house.
For the IPAs.
For the IPAs, at least, the hazy IPAs, because we felt that it brought a completely different flavor profile to the hops, a little more, and mouthfeel and texture from, we've been using Conan. That's just
Giga yeast, and
Giga yeast.
They recently just closed their doors too.
So now we're
RIP
using
Giga.
For the most part, we're using Imperial Juice, and it's a different strain of yeast, and we're still learning how to use it, which means we're still trying to figure it out. So yes, we absolutely do. But what works best is also very subjective. What I think works best is different than what one of the other brewers who writes a recipe thinks works best versus what a home brewer thinks works best. And we'll actually get to that probably with our next beer with Pine Fresh. We used a completely different yeast than we normally use for that. So, I mean, that's half the fun. We have so many ingredients available to our disposal. Just making it, we're testing stuff out all the time.
And I feel like the yeast is one of the most like forgotten components of making a beer, and that changing one of the levers that you can use to change flavors and profiles in beer. I think we've all gotten like so focused on the hops, especially for the hoppy beers, that we've kind of forgotten like how much difference in character you get from the yeast, right? I mean, when we were doing some of the lagers, we would change the lager yeast strain. The beer was essentially identical, but we would change the yeast strain just to see like the difference that a yeast would provide in a clean lager. And the differences were striking. The exact same beer with just a different type of lager yeast was completely different in character. Some we liked more, some we liked less. And that's just like the tip of the iceberg, because we use some pretty crazy yeasts in these homebrew beers. They're actually 4 different beers, 4 different yeasts.
Yep.
And they're all
Make
unique in
scheduling fun.
character. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing people don't realize is how difficult it is to propagate yeasts and keep them alive and happy, but also in the rotation of all the beers that you need to make for the market. So, yeast wrangling and harvesting and all that jazz is not easy.
No, but it's worth it, and it's it's just part of the job, trying to figure it out. And I mean, we're always trying to make the best beer, and if that means changing yeast, we'll change yeast. And who knows? Just because we're using this yeast now does not mean we're beholden to it. We may change yeast again. We do have a house yeast in the sense that there's a yeast we use most often because we have to get to know how to use it just to keep up with production, and we do have a schedule that we need to keep. But other than that, we do play around a lot. We have these 2 small tanks, a 5-barrel and 10-barrel. For anyone who doesn't know, barrel is 31 gallons. I'm not exactly sure where that unit came from, but it exists, and that's what we use.
Probably the English.
It's probably...
Any number that's not round or easy, it's like the English.
So that's just the unit we use, and that's where we mess around. We actually filled those tanks in the last couple of days making a sour IPA, and we're trying out a brand new hop that we only could get 11 pounds of or 22 pounds of. So we're making a small beer with it just to figure it out. And that's half the fun. So yeah, we're always messing around, sometimes with yeast, sometimes with fruit, sometimes with hops. Just depends on what we're doing at the time.
Yep.
I think we should try out another beer.
Next one.
Beer or pine?
Let's do Pine Fresh.
Yeah, let me grab.
So Pine Fresh, that is the third homebrew beer before we end on kind of the classic OG Muir Woods. All right, so
this beer,
Magic, it says a West Coast IPA, but it's not clear.
and it's not clear. What defines what is a West Coast IPA, right? Why can't a West Coast IPA be hazy? No. Again, speaking about trying out new ingredients, sometimes some ingredients are easier to use than others, and we don't know until we try it. And trying to figure that out is a lot of fun sometimes discouraging. We have to get our labels printed 2 weeks before the beer is put into the can. So this beer by Brian Winkle, he was one of the winners, and he came in with this awesome West Coast IPA that was, still bitter, still a little amber, but kind of bridged the gap between old school West Coast IPA and new school, modern, tropical, juicy IPAs and hops. And it was awesome. And come to find out when we get the recipe, he's using a Norwegian yeast strain called Quake. And it's known for fermenting beers extremely warm at upwards of 95 degrees Fahrenheit, which is very warm. We ferment most of our beers at around 68 degrees. Because it's warm, they ferment very quickly. But most yeast, when you do that, throw off a lot of weird flavors. And we don't want that. We want to be able to control the character of the beer, make sure that they're nice and clean. Got Kimball here making sure, doing some housekeeping.
What if I wanted to go back and try some business?
So and his beer was crystal clear and awesome. We're like, all right, this is what we're going to use to make his beer. Whatever we do at our scale with hops, and it probably has something to do with our process for using hops that we've learned that works in our tanks to make sure we get an amazing hop character. Did this, and we got a really hazy beer. Suffice to say, the beer still is extremely piney, as the original recipe was, and also fruity. It just has this visual character, but I do think there's something to the haze that creates a little bit more texture than just if it was clear. And it's half the fun of trying stuff out.
What's so ironic about all this is, we get reprimanded by internal and external folks when a beer isn't hazy enough, like, go figure. And then when we wanted to make a clear beer, then it gets hazy. I don't think anybody cares. So it's really funny how kind of beers, or the IPA in particular, has evolved over the last 5 years on, what was once like all your West Coast IPAs had to be, or all your IPAs had to be just clear, like crystal clear, run through a filter, see right through it. And then all of a sudden the parents just kind of like went out the window and be like, okay, we want these things to look turbid and look murky. But those are also like these really like quick indicators for people. When you walked into a bar and you're like, hey, that looks different. What is that person drinking? And that really kind of set off the trend of these like juicy, more tropical, less bitter, rounded, juicy, fruity IPAs, which became hazy IPA. And I mean, arguably right now in the world, or at least in Northern California, it's like, this is not even hazy IPA anymore. Like, this is IPA. Like the hazy IPA is IPA in the market right now. Like the percentage of people who are doing hazy IPAs versus like clear IPAs is probably like, 8-2. I mean, that's bad math. I should like reduce like 4-1. You know, like 4-1 is like the number of like hazy beers to West Coast beers right now because that's what people want, and this is like what IPA has become. And you know, that's cool. Like that's what people want to drink, and our job is to make beer that people want to drink.
So Raymond's asking, what makes a West Coast IPA as opposed to an East Coast IPA? Is it just the hazy character? Ultimately, styles and anything we call a beer is just there to help you guys understand what you're buying and kind of tell you what you're going to get. So West Coast IPA, the IPA that developed in California, in Northern California, San Diego, was a very bitter, very dry, very resinous, piney IPA with other citrus characteristics, mostly because of the hops available at the time, and that is what honestly helped IPA blow up and become.
That's what helped craft beer blow up.
Helped craft beer blow up, and it's awesome. It's still an awesome style. And it's definitely evolved what people at least consider West Coast IPA. But yes, it was absolutely clear. As we as brewers developed better ways to brew or use hops, along with discovering other yeasts, along with the hop growers realizing that they needed to grow hops that were more focused on aroma and more oil content that would provide that aroma and flavor, something happened to make the beers hazy in that entire thing. I think it's a perfect storm of events that everyone was trying to make bigger, better, fruitier beers using hops. And this leads to the next question of what causes them to be murky. And nobody really knows the exact mechanism that causes it.
Isn't that crazy? Like
it's crazy.
The number of hazy beers that get made every single week across the country. And I don't think there's anybody who can tell you definitively
what to do.
This is why, and this is how, and without fail, it will always be hazy if you do this. No one can do it.
No one can do it. What we do know is that it has absolutely something to do with a relationship between the hops and the yeast and what is going on. Something there is happening. And there's some hops that make it hazier than others and some yeasts that make it hazier than others. And when you throw the hops in, matters. And so we've developed a process that seems to work for us to make these hazy beers. Except it's funny, when we make our West Coast, we know that makes really delicious beers. And that's how we make our West Coast IPAs. And they still end up clear, again, because we're using a different yeast. And this, we didn't know this yeast, and this is what happened here. So I wouldn't say that, the only difference between a West Coast and the East Coast is the haze. I think the East Coast and New England in particular popularized some of these techniques that I think the West Coast had already dominated the IPA scene, and New England was probably coming into its own doing something.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it was also just, the Northeast and New England, they were kind of reinterpreting what was happening at the West Coast, the West Coast at the time. And they're like, well, we don't want to do exactly what they're doing. We want to kind of tailor it to what we like. And I think it also got caught up in like the IBU wars of, I think the San Diego breweries did so much of, which is everyone trying to get to that theoretical maximum of 100 IBUs. And, it became like a badge of courage and a badge of honor to be like, I can drink 100 IBU beers. And I think that turned a lot of people off to IPAs. And I think like on the East Coast, they're like, well, we don't want to make an IPA like that. We're going to want to make one that you actually want to drink. Versus, just kind of throwing it down and, trying to prove your beer bravery.
Anyways, nobody knows. You throw a lot of hops in a beer, hop usage continue to go up and up and up. Like I think you drink like a Stone IPA and that was like 1.5 pound per barrel dry hop and it was huge. Our average is 3.5 now, so more than double what that was. And it just takes that much hop to create this kind of character, and it's just really cool. We do that now for almost all of our beers: pale ales, double dry hop pilsners, IPAs, hazy IPAs. We throw as much hop as we think we need to get the character we want, because that's the whole point.
It's a very inefficient way of using the hops too. Hops are not cheap. Hops are. I always tell people hops are somewhere in the range of a of a porterhouse steak and a ribeye steak in price per pound. They're not cheap. They're anywhere from $11, $12 to $20, $25 a pound, and we will throw that 100 times over into a beer plus to get the character that we want. But again, it's about pulling out the flavors and the aromas, specifically the aromas now, versus putting them in earlier in the production process and extracting more bitterness, because we've already found that people don't like bitterness. They like hops, but not the bitterness.
Yeah, and to get back to this beer, we actually did something really fun, which we'd never done. Two things. We used the Quake Norwegian yeast, and we also used the hop extract in the boil, because that's what he did. And it's like, all right, we've never done this. And honestly, while it does provide it provides a bitterness, but it's very clean. It doesn't necessarily get in the way of the beer, and it doesn't linger afterwards in a way that just leaves you not wanting to try it anymore. But you also get that pine character, and you also get like this really cool fruity mango-y kind of melon thing. It's and we're not using any weird crazy hops. It just goes to show. I think this is Simcoe, Citra, CTZ, Columbus are the main hops in this, and it goes to show that even some of the older hops, when used, whether it's the way they're grown, the hops we're getting, or the way they're used, yeah, it's awesome to taste these older hops, older in quotations, making really awesome fruity beers.
And I also feel like using these Quake strains also provides, I just feel like at that high temperature fermentation, even though it's like pretty clean, there's like this slight like pineapple essence to it, which I think like contributes to the hop character as well.
It's like a tartness or something that kind of cuts through a little, that it's not really tart, but
it's like essence.
It's essence. That's an awesome way of putting it. Beer's super refreshing, and yep, we called it a West Coast IPA. Oops.
Thought it would be clear. The homebrew version was clear, but this one isn't. But that's beer. That's trying new things, and you can't be held back by the fear of something not being exactly right, because then you miss out on all that's possible.
I like Raymond. It's like drinking the fruit of a pine cone. Yeah, it's like if a pine cone was a fruit and you just squeeze the juice out of it, like, is absolutely what it would be.
And hop cones look like pine cones, and they're just beautiful when you rip them open. So,
speaking of pine cones, do we get into the one that actually has a pine, some pine on the label here?
Muir Woods.
Getting some glassware going. This one, I bet you we've brewed Muir Woods more than any other beer.
Oh, without a doubt.
Like, it was one of the first beers I brewed here.
I think it was one of the first 10 beers that we ever brewed here.
Muir Woods, back, very OG beer. It's gone through a couple iterations, and it's never going to go away. But the original recipe, written by John Warner, another local homebrew legend here, who seems to win most of our competitions.
Yeah.
He knows how to brew very exciting, over-the-top beers, and that is his forte. And it's, again, getting back to why home brewing is awesome. He doesn't hold back at all. I used to come to these homebrew club meetings and chat with him, and everyone would always flock to him because he would have his crazy IPA, and then he'd have like 14 bottles of sours. Like, well, I had extra Brett here, but then I bought some fruit here, and then I don't know, put it in a soup can. I don't know. Just, he always did weird, fun stuff, which is awesome. Like, he loved making beer. He did like 1 or 2 gallon batches too. It was never like a lot. It was just enough to just do different things. And this beer was part of the Muir Woods competition, which was to make a beer inspired by the Muir Woods.
Evocative Muir Woods. We threw this one out to the San Francisco Homebrew Club, and we said, guys and gals, like, make us an IPA evocative of Muir Woods, whatever that means to you, open to interpretation. Like, do what you got to do. And we ended up getting like 24, 25 like different variants of what Muir Woods meant to people. And what we did is we kind of did a certified judging round, whittled it down to the top 3. each of the home brewers came and brewed with us on our system. And then we started off, and this was the very first homebrew competition. So it's kind of fun to like bring it all back and have this one in the same, in the same 4-pack as the others. Is we said, okay, like here's the Muir Woods flight. You have Muir Woods A, B, and C. Didn't know who brewed them. All you had was the beer on a paddle when we still had paddles for tasting flights, and then a poker chip. And you would drink the beer, and then you would put the poker chip into the bucket. There was an A bucket, a B bucket, and a C bucket, of which one you liked the most. And this beer won. And this beer won more than the other 2 beer votes combined, probably even by 2. It was that big of a difference. This is also the beer that tastes to me the least like Muir Woods. The other 2 finalists, and actually Andrew Simsack was one of the finalists. He had brewed an Imperial Red IPA, and Keith Kost, another homebrew legend. I think he was like the National Homebrewer of the Year for a couple years in a row. Brewed a beautiful red IPA that just had the red color. It looked like redwood trees, and it had that loamy, earthy, like damp notes to it. They were both like so beautiful, and they just reminded me of Muir Woods. And of course, they didn't even come close to winning. And I think I picked the losing beer, the last place beer in every homebrew competition that we do. I think I picked the losing beer as my favorite. But I think it also like just goes to show like that's why we do these competitions. It's not about what Magic likes, what I like, or any one other person likes. Ultimately it comes down to the customers and people who drink our beer, and they drank this beer and they love this beer. And I'm sure we had, if one of the other 2 beers had won, we probably wouldn't be making it over and over again like Muir Woods. Whereas this is one of the iconic beers for us that people think about when they think about Barebottle.
Yeah, and it's funny thinking about how to like tasting this beer and how to describe it compared to another very piney beer. And you could take those exact flavors, but they're the same flavors but different. They're both piney, and they're both kind of citrusy and fruity and juicy. But this has got it's lighter, it's fluffy, it sits on your palate in a different way. Where I mean, the yeast is completely different. There's like maybe a little lighter like peach fuzz or something to it. They're different beers with like, but like it's what makes tasting beer hard. They're good for reasons, but it's what makes it fun. They're both piney and citrusy, but completely different.
And I feel like this beer in particular from John, like John Warner always throws the kitchen sink, at it, in the sense that I think when we first brewed it, we're like, that's too many different forms, types of hops, man. Like, you know how hard it's going to be for us to find all of these? But again, like we did it, and the beer came out great. I think there's also like, to me, like what's kind of characteristic of Warner's beers is they always have a nice tartness to it, whether it's a sour or not. In this case, it's not a sour, but there's always like this slight, I think there's like acidulated malt in here that has that slight little like just a little tart without being too tart edge to it that just gives it a little different character, that gives it a little bit of a different body, a little bit of a different finish, which I think makes it unique. I'm going to look at the label because there's no acidulated malt, I'm going to feel like an idiot.
I don't know.
Nope,
I mean,
there it is. Wireman acidulated, 1%. That's right.
So awesome beer. I don't think we're ever going to stop making it. And it's really refreshing to try this beer. It's very different than most of the other beers we make just any given week. So it's always fun to have this on the board. It varies the board up. Come in and try it if you haven't, or you're drinking it now. So you've tried it.
Actually, I don't think we have it on the board anymore, right?
We'll have it tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow for the anniversary party, the 5th anniversary party. So I think a lot of the homebrewers are going to be making it out. And I think this is what everybody has like come to know about us, certainly here on the call, is we don't keep beers around very long because we just keep rotating and doing different things that they disappear. And people are like, I really love that beer. When are you gonna brew it again? It's like, I don't know, maybe sometime next year. Maybe, I don't know, 6-7 months from now. We don't do, the frequency of repeats is really, really low here, which is fun because it makes everything just new and exciting for us. But we always appreciate the patience that people show with us to be like, well, I love that hazy IPA, but I'm gonna have to wait till next year to try it again. But there's a good chance that the next one that we make, they're gonna love as well. So we did hold back all these beers for the anniversary party tomorrow. So for sure, all these beers will be available tomorrow, as well as kind of a bunch of other beers if you want to get a quick synopsis of what we're pouring tomorrow for the first time ever.
I'm going to answer Raymond's question real quick. Do we have a secret map that includes the brews that will reoccur? And can we tell you about the brews that will be available tomorrow? Look at that. Is the map secret in the sense that I guess we sit down almost every other week and figure out what we're going to brew? I will say we try not to rebrew beers. Except for we rebrew beers about every 6 months, and those are the ones that we think we want to try again, or that people liked, or that we want to change something about and amplify something. So it's about every 6 months is anything that we will repeat. That doesn't mean that we're always trying new things too, and we'll take any new processes or techniques that we think help make a beer better, and we'll throw them into every single beer. So I don't know. There's no secret map. We can't really. There's no nothing we can put it that'll tell you when beers are going to come out, because we don't even know half the time.
Nope. We're the ones brewing it.
And we're the ones brewing it. I mean, we have 5 or 6 different people who write recipes, if not more. So we have fun with it, and I think that's part of the fun. You're always going to get something different when you come here. Which, more importantly, tomorrow we're going to have a ton of new beer. We've been working really hard to bring a bunch of special beers, a bunch of different beer. These beers were our anniversary excitement boxes. These were the ones that we're really excited about and that we specifically brewed for the anniversary. Some of these other beers, we've just been holding on to barrels for a while that there's only enough to make a few kegs of. And so we're going to have, first and foremost, the big one is a double IPA called Sheet Cake with probably the first or second most hops we've ever put in a beer. 9.1%. Huge beer. Super sweet, super decadent. It's called Sheet Cake for a reason. It's awesome. It's just a fruit juice bomb.
And I think we did 20 cases of it, 25th. How
we
many
did like
cases?
40 cases.
So
cans.
20 cases here, 20 cases in Santa Clara.
So come
Tap
get
room
it
only.
tomorrow. Taproom only. The only way we could fit that amount of hops into a beer was by doing this small amount of run. It doesn't work in our bigger tanks. We will have 2 apple brandy barrel-aged stouts. One by itself, we did 4 barrels about 15 months ago, almost 15 months ago, and felt one of these barrels was so good by itself that we didn't do anything to it, put it in a bottle. I think we got 16 cases of that. And then we took some of the other bottles, blended them, and went deep into the apple brandy, just into that apple character, and added some vanilla to make it an apple pie a la mode with some cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice, clove. And so it's an apple pie. And both of those 13.5%.
And what's really cool is, like, as crazy as it sounds, I feel like everyone's doing bourbon barrel aged beers and have been for the last few years, but I don't know anybody who has done an apple brandy beer. And that's cool.
That's pretty cool. We also took one of our sours, threw it into 4 different kinds of wine barrels. So we've got a Sauvignon Blanc barrel-aged sour. We've got a Sauvignon Blanc barrel-aged sour with plums. We have a cherry brandy barrel-aged sour. And this one's crazy. It's like, I can't tell if that one's my favorite or they're just the regular Sauvignon Blanc. It's like a movie theater cherry slushy. It's really weird and mesmerizing at the same time. And what's the last one? A peach brandy with apricots. So all of those draft only tap room. And then just kind of a little fun little thing we found in the back. We put up barley wine in a barrel back in January or February, but we had the base in the keg in the back. So you can try the base now, 13.6%. It'll be a barrel aged beer that we release sometime in the future. But right now is just this high octane, over the top. If you love American barley wines, this is bitter, resinous. It honestly felt like it hasn't aged a day. It was so big the first, just when we brewed it, it's still.
It's like this thing needs to sit down for a year. And you drink it a year later,
You're like,
"It needs to sit down for
another year. It is so over the top. But if you like, caramely, raisiny, resinous, hoppy, hop water, malt water, that's it for you. Let's see, what else? What other secrets have we got? What is our
eyes and I can barely
yeah?
read
What is our
anything.
favorite and least favorite beers?
Oh, that's a good question.
Or a beer that doesn't get the credit it deserves.
Those are three. We'll take all three. Best, least,
favorite, least
underrated.
favorite, or rather, is
best,
that a
least,
style
underrated.
or is that just beers?
That we done.
Oh, that we've done.
Oh, wait.
Alex was screaming some things we won't talk about. Favorite beer that we've brewed. Oh man, that changes like all the time. It depends on my mood.
Time. What is it?
Honestly, a few weeks ago, I think Tropical House was one of my favorite beers we brewed in a really long time. I think because of what it represents and what we're doing, and how like the flavors that I like, how well they're represented in that beer. I love just high note, tropical, stanky. I want fruit that is about to go ripe in my beer, like that's, or about to go rotten in my beer. I want it to be so like stinky, like that's the kind of flavors I like. And that beer had a lot of that, a lot of guava, a lot of passion fruit, but it was a lager. It was like, and being able to do that in a lager was really incredible. Least favorite beers that
I'll go. We'll switch.
All
then
right.
I'll do like my favorite. Actually, like I said before, I think Hands to Hold is probably my favorite beer that we've done in over a year. I just feel like it's a beer and it's a style that we've never done before. I think that yeast character is probably the prettiest yeast character I've ever gotten in a beer before. And it just, to me, like it hits everything. It hits I want a little bit of hop. It's got the hop. I want a little bit of just like unique flavors, and that kind of that soft Belgian-y character is super pretty, but it's also like not sweet and it's not high alcohol. To me, it's one of those beers that kind of checks all the boxes, but I think above all else, it's just different. And because of that, I just really kind of appreciate it.
And least favorite of our beers, that's a hard one. We made a beer a long time ago called Pixie Pie.
Was Pixie Pie was that different than Kirby's Adventure?
It got rebranded.
I think that's my least favorite too.
That's and that's an interesting one because it was the first time we tried making a heavily fruited. This was very early on.
Milkshake pale.
Milkshake pale, dry hopped milkshake pale, and using fruits we'd never used before and processes we'd never done before. And I think something happened. We've since learned every fruit is different. Every fruit needs to be processed differently, used differently at different times, and some do better at some things than others. And
I think what ruined Pixie Pie / Kirby's Adventure, which ironically, like we get asked about all the time, like when we're bringing
some
it back.
people love it, right?
Some people love it.
Which is everyone's different flavor.
But I think
palette.
like what ruined that beer in our minds, and I mean maybe ruin is a harsh word because we've dumped beers that we didn't like. This one wasn't bad enough for us to dump. We thought there's some redeeming qualities about it. I think what ruined that beer was it was a peach blueberry pie, if you remember, and the peach has a ton of pectin, and the pectin, I think, just kept all the hops, the dry hops, in suspension, so the hops never had a chance to drop out because they were trapped in pectin, in peach pectin.
And blueberry skins like float, which we didn't know, and so you get this like tannic, harsh, weird, like, and then it's weird. We've learned that blueberry doesn't actually come across as blueberry in beer.
Nope.
It doesn't actually taste like anything.
Nope.
And apricot doesn't actually taste like very much in beer either. And so you get these two fruits that barely taste like anything with hops, but you get this like, it was sweet. It was like hop. I don't know. It was a weird flavor profile. That's all. So it was my least favorite, but
Mine
like
as well.
was also something that we learned. We learned so much,
Yeah.
and now like I use that. Blueberry is a great balancing tool that we use now a lot to not only thicken beers up or give them sugar with and color without necessarily adding too much character, and which is important sometimes. And so I think if you've tried any of our sours, they are we now have used fruit enough to know what fruits to use where, and our sours are a testament to that. And I think Pixie Pie was definitely a lesson in what not to do.
All right, most underrated now.
Most underrated of the beers we make. Hands to hold. I think I'm not sure if you guys have tried this beer. If you guys are drinking it, I haven't heard a lot of love from just people in general about that beer, but I know beers like that don't ever get as much credit as they deserve, and that beer is subtly beautiful. And yeah, I can't tell which. It might be my favorite on the table. Belgian beers in particular don't get as much love as they deserve, and this beer is awesome. It doesn't. You would never know that it was dry hopped as heavily as it was because it's so pretty and delicate and subtle, and that yeast character is bringing so much to the table. It's underrated by far.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I didn't mention that I really like about that beer, and especially the can art in general for that beer, is like we are a brand that throws like pool floaties onto cans, and this is really like one of the more serious cans that we've ever done, on the notes section, just like why we brewed this beer, what it means. Takes on a much more kind of serious tone than we've ever done before. And I think, I love beers for a purpose. I love things that help the local community. And I think like that's like one of the perfect beers in my mind. As far as like most underrated for me, like I'm a big fan of, I like our sours. I'm particularly a big fan of Key Lime Pirate, which is...
That is not underrated.
No, yeah, but I feel like of all the sours, it gets like the least amount of love for how often we've brewed it. I mean, maybe we brewed it like 3 or 4 times now, but I don't know. Like to me, like that's in my mind, that's the best sour that we do.
Next time we brew it, make a margarita with it. It's fantastic.
We should put a margarita on the can. Actually, the can art on that one's really pretty too, with that pirate ship and the big kind of lime moon. But I think that one that's a Kelsey, who is the other co-head brewer. That's one of her beers. What I love about it is it's the beer that's exactly as advertised. It's called Key Lime Pirate. It tastes like a key lime pie. It has that key lime tartness. It has that a little bit of vanilla kind of creaminess, and it somehow has like a graham cracker crustiness to it. And to me, like it hits all those notes. It's on the tartar side. I think it's less on the sweet side. Maybe that's why it doesn't get as much love as some of the sweeter sours, but maybe that's why I like it more, is I don't like sweet things. And I think that one just hits all the boxes for me.
Yeah. And so please ask any more questions. I know Lester and I can sit here for hours answering them. Otherwise, I think I'm definitely going to enjoy some of these beers here to end the night. I hope to see some of you guys tomorrow. If any of you come in, please come by and I'll be here. Ask for me, ask for Lester. We'll chat with you. We're happy. I'm so super happy to celebrate 5 years here.
It's been a long 5 years, and it's also been a short 5 years. It's been a crazy 5 years. There's never been a dull moment, but kind of above all else, like we appreciate everybody who bought the mixed box. We appreciate the home brewers who brewed the beers. We appreciate really like all the support you've all given us, particularly during COVID, where we feel really fortunate that we didn't have to lay off or furlough anybody during COVID. We kept everybody kind of on the boat. That was something that we knew, would cause us to lose a little bit of money in the short run, but we knew would pay dividends in the long run. The long run being, we knew this would bounce back quickly. We knew that if you let all your workers go, it's going to be hard to bring them back. It's going to be hard to hire everybody. And that's exactly what we're seeing is a lot of places are having a hard time hiring workers. We don't have that problem, fortunately, because we kind of kept everybody here. So, but what like ultimately allowed us to do that is just the support that we got, from our local market here in the Bay Area. Like, thank you all for, coming in or buying beer to go or having delivered to your house. Like literally like all those things, you think that's just a little support buying a 4-pack here or there, but add it all up. And that's the only reason why we're all still here, post COVID is all the support from all the, all of our fans throughout the Bay Area. Like you guys, by buying beer during COVID, kept us afloat. So thank you.
So yeah, we'll be celebrating our anniversary here in San Francisco. And if you didn't know, we have a tap room in Santa Clara. So check out our Santa Clara tap room as well. We'll have the exact same beers down there. We'll actually have a slushy machine down there, which I don't know why we don't have one. I've been asking for a slushy machine for so long. Don't understand. The struggle is real.
What's your favorite thing you've got to do here?
Oh, other than the slushy machine, what is the favorite thing you've gotten to do here? That's a crazy question.
I'll jump in then to start. So starting a brewery 5 years ago, I never thought that I would be roasting coffee. Yeah, I didn't start a brewery to roast coffee, but roasting coffee was just a way for us to, again, like do something where we're serving something different, unique earlier in the day. And I'd never roasted coffee in my life prior to starting the coffee program here. And now I can't imagine my life without roasting coffee and drinking, freshly roasted coffee that we do here every day. And then the wine program too. Like, again, like I never thought starting a brewery that we would be making wine. And here we are just making some really beautiful wines. And I think the sparkling rosé that we did this year was one of like the weirdest, kind of craziest fun things that we did, where it was a 100% natural wine. There was no yeast, no acids added, no water added, no nutrients added, not even carbonation added, and it was sparkling. And to me, it's like, this is literally, I would love to tell people, like handing them a bottle, like this is literally just grape juice that God intended to be made into sparkling wine. And we did nothing but shepherd it along the way. And again, like I never thought that I would ever make wine at a brewery. And now, I kind of figured out what I want to do with the rest of my life is, retire on a vineyard somewhere and make sparkling rosé.
I don't know if I have any one particular favorite thing, but I think even being able to experiment as much as we do and go to hop selection and learn.
Tell us what do you mean by hop selection?
Hop selection. One of the coolest things that we get to do is select our own hops. And what that means, to kind of bring a wine analogy, you go to Anderson Valley to try Pinot Noir or any other wine region to try grapes. And we all know that grapes taste different across the globe, from France to Napa, Sonoma to Paso Robles to Oregon, to pick anywhere in the world, Italy, Spain. Hops are actually the same thing. There's no reason that this agricultural product would be any different. And so we get to, most of the hops in America are grown in Oregon and Washington. We get to go to Oregon, Washington, and we get a bunch of different hops that were grown in different places and picked at different times. We get to smell them and decide which hops we get to use for the next year. And that is really cool. And I don't know, kind of scary that we're making these decisions that will affect our beer for the entire next year.
And they're also expensive.
And they're very expensive.
We were basically committing $250,000 when we're up there to be like, we'll buy $250,000 of these hops. We're gonna rub them in 2 minutes and tell you which one we like for each one.
And it's an eye-opening experience as a home brewer, you go to the store and you buy Mosaic, but we get to go up to Washington and we get 3 or 4 or 5, 6 different Mosaics thrown in front of us, and how they smell is so different, every single one.
Yep.
And we don't even know if we're picking the best one necessarily, but we're picking the one that smells the best for what we think we want to do. And I think that shows itself in the beer. And I think the beer is only getting better and better as we get better at doing that process, from fermenting the beer to everything else. And just seeing this brewery and the beers get better along the way is like been awesome.
Absolutely. Other questions?
Oh, we didn't even talk about the local collab sour. That's an awesome one.
Tell us about local.
We forgot about that. Is a special beer.
But that's because it wasn't a homebrew collab.
It wasn't a homebrew.
It was
collab.
a pro collab. But,
gonna-
but Reagan and local.
Reagan, local brewing is one of the local breweries here in the city. It's called local brewing.
It is out by the end of the Caltrain line by AT&T Park.
Bluxom and 4th, I think. Sure. Bluxom and 4th. And Reagan, owner, brewer, is one of our favorite people in the city. And we've been talking about doing a collab for so long. I've known her since as long as I've been in San Francisco. And we finally made it happen towards the end of COVID, or not the end of COVID, but towards as things were reopening.
We hope is the end of COVID.
Hope is the end of COVID. As things were reopening, we're finally able to do a collab over there. We did an awesome hazy IPA, all gas, no rakes. It's got a fun story to it, but you should have tried it. It's not available anymore. And she doesn't get to do as many sours as we do. So we decided for anniversary to bring her along and make an imperial fruited sour. And we bonded over our love of tiki drinks and decided to make a Mai Tai inspired drink or sour. And we went, tried a bunch of Mai Tais, and you quickly realize that a Mai Tai is mostly rum, and all the things that rum brings to the table, with orange juice, maybe some pineapple, and orgeat, which is an almond syrup to balance it out. It's like, wow, how do we make a rum flavor in a beer? And so you use rum soaked oak chips, because you can't actually add a rum to beer.
It's illegal.
That's illegal. Rum soaked oak chips and some cherry, some orange, some pineapple, and a little bit of soursop, and what's the other? Banana passion fruit. Some weird tropical fruits that we have. We have a lot of fruit lying around. And this thing is awesome. It's
really good.
It's really refreshing. It's 8%. There's no reason it to be as refreshing as it is, but kind of like a Mai Tai. It's dangerous. You drink a Mai Tai, it's just a cocktail of rums. And it was a fun project to work on with her and do something completely different. And, it's weird. We'd never made a Mai Tai beer. And I think it's kind of starting our weird cocktail inspired sours that we're starting to do now. So come try it. Reagan will be here. Say hi to her. She's one of my favorite people in the city.
She will outdrink every one of you.
Absolutely. But yes, please drink the local collab. I'm sure that one is going to fly very quickly.
And also go visit local. Like that's, in terms of things that are underrated, she and that brewery does not get nearly the amount of credit that they deserve for being as amazing as they are.
She's making some of my favorite beers in the city.
Yep.
The Bluxom Black Lager.
Amazing. Great.
Best black lager in the city.
Yep.
If you like that. So, yeah. I think anyone else has any more questions, please ask away. But I think we're going to close this up here. We got a long day tomorrow.
Yeah. And it's been a long week.
It's been a long it's been a long
several
month.
weeks. It's been a long year, actually. So anyways, yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. We hope you had a good time. Again, thanks for all your support throughout the year. It has meant the world to us. So hopefully we see you tomorrow. If not, we'll see you next time you come around. So
Cheers.
Cheers.
That was fun.
Those couches are very photogenic. Like you look like you're